Hello, it is time for the ABCs of Art. This is a new series that I am doing for 2026, which every week I pick a letter. Today is the letter B, and I talk about a word that's related to art, and I'm going to show you a technique, some tips and techniques today for the letter B. And the reason that I really wanted to start doing this, I did the word of the year last year during 2025, and I really wanted to focus more on techniques, and I wanted to focus more on like art specific words. So last year was just a word. Some of them were art related, some of them weren't. They were just just different words that I had picked. And this year I really wanted to focus more on sharing some techniques, sharing some tips. And today, for the letter B, I am going to use the word blending. Blending is probably one of the questions that I get asked the most about how to blend well, how to have my paints blend together, because there are so many mistakes that people make when they try to blend. So today I'm going to show you kind of 3 different ways to blend, techniques if you will, but I'm also going to share with you 5 different mistakes that you might make, and how to not make those anymore, right? So that you can blend better. And I'm going to share a couple of I think there are 6 different tips that I have for you for blending. Now, most of these tips, tricks, ideas, techniques, and things are made for canvas. I am going to be doing them in my watercolor 140-pound book. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to show you the techniques, and you can experiment with it on canvas, and you'll get a little different results. Really, here's the thing with blending. You have to practice. And that's why I like doing things like this in a journal, because it feels more like practice. It doesn't have to feel like a finished piece of artwork. And that is why I have 3 shelves over there of journals and sketchbooks and things that I have filled up with ideas and practicing and colors, just all kinds of different things, and just experimenting with all kinds of things in the journal. Hey there, Judy. Oh, very good. Yes, the replay will be on my Facebook page. I always try to pin them to the top so they're easy to find, but probably the easiest way is to get onto my email list, and then you can watch the replay on my YouTube channel, which is where all of the videos get housed over there. And I've actually created a playlist just for the ABCs of Art videos that I'll be doing, so you can kind of watch all of those together, so if you miss any week. So yes, thanks for popping on, and it's easy to be able to watch the replay. So let me go ahead and tell you what I'm working with today besides the watercolor journal for the word blending. Tell me too, as you're watching this, if you have ever had problems blending one color into another, having like a gradation where you do light to dark, because that's blending. Tell me if you've ever had some problems doing that, and what are the problems that you've had. Are you just not getting it a smooth transition? Are you seeing brush strokes? Are you what are the problems that you specifically have when you're blending? And hopefully what I'm going to show to you today will help to solve a lot of those. One of the tips is to use, I want to say, good paint. Paint that is opaque, meaning that it covers well. I am actually going to be using my golden paints today. Now, these are not paints that I started with. I actually just got them 2 years ago, and I just got a red, blue, and yellow, and a white. I didn't even get black. And I'm going to be using my cobalt blue. And here's a little secret maybe you don't know about. This doesn't apply to like craft paints, But if you start getting Liquitex and, you know, different acrylic paints like that, Winsor and Newton, you know, any kind, these golden paints, they will have these lines at the top right here. And when a paint is opaque, they will paint a little swatch of the color over top, and you can tell by how much it covers up those lines whether it's opaque or not. So this cobalt blue, I don't even know if you can see the lines underneath there. It's so opaque. It's a very opaque paint because it covers up those lines. For the most part, golden is a better quality of paint. It has more pigment in it than acrylic paints. You know, whether it's, I have this Crafters collection, which I feel like that's a pretty decent thickness. You know, it's pretty decent paint. But a lot of what I get are like the Deco Art Americana, and those are more like craft paints. Once you start getting into even like the student grade paints, they will have that little, you know, the lines over there and painted over. Now I got a little set of sample, like a sample, I have this piece of hair right there. It was a sample set of golden paint. So I got like these little tiny tubes. Like, I don't think they even sell them like this. So this tube of paint does not have, it even actually says on there, not for resale. But this is the quinacridone magenta. It's probably one of my favorites because it's kind of like a purpley red. And I just love the pink that it makes when I add white to it. And then I have titanium white in the golden. Titanium white is a very opaque white. You can get, I want to say zinc oxide white. It's more transparent, but the titanium white, basically in any kind of paints, is going to be a more opaque. So those are the three colors. I have clean water, I have some paper towels, and I have kind of an assortment of brushes. One of the mistakes that I see people make when they're blending is they're using a wet brush when they blend. And when I show the technique, I'll show you what I mean there. You want to probably have two different brushes. One that you can keep wet with the paint and one that you can do with the blending. So I like to use like these kind of like 1-inch flat brushes when I'm painting. Even in the journal, it'll work pretty well. You can have one maybe that's more like just like a 1/2 inch, you know, it's a little bit thinner. But then what I like to have, like this is one that is, you know, not quite as wide. So I might use one of those. But then what I like to have is a brush, a flat brush that's nice and soft. And this is what I will use to blend with. And I will keep it dry. I won't put it in the water. And if I do have to wash it out for some reason, that's why I want to make sure that I have the paper towel so that I can make sure that I'm working with a dry brush. I have this other brush that I might use kind of in blending, but it's a little bit thicker and the bristles are not quite as soft. So I brought that one over here, but then I brought kind of two little smaller brushes. This one is a stencil brush, and one of the techniques that I'm going to show to you is with more of a brush like this. But can you guess where this brush came from? This brush, it says Wet and Wild on it. This brush came from the Dollar Tree, and it is a makeup brush. And it is this nice, soft, bristled brush. Good morning, Linda. Oh, you went to the wrong page. That's okay. So if you were not on my text list, I sent out a text, and it has a direct link to my page. So you can put text in the comments, and I'll make sure and get that link to you. But this works really well for blending. So you might go check out your makeup section, go to the Dollar Tree, and they have some nice bigger brushes that are really soft. And, you know, since I'm working in my journal a little smaller, I got this one. So I have those. I also have sponges. And this is one of the techniques that I'm going to show. Have you ever seen one of these little finger daubers, little finger sponges? I know it has red on there. It's probably quinacridone magenta actually, but it's, sometimes I don't wash them off, but it's still soft, right? So this is a little finger dauber, so I'm going to show you that. Or they have these at the Dollar Tree too, these foam daubers. I think that's what they're called. So you could use any kind of sponge. I have these here in my studio, so I use those. You may also want a spray bottle when you are blending, especially if you're doing this on a canvas. I'm not going to use the spray bottle because it only has one stream of water. It's better to really have a mister. So in place of the spray bottle, what I'm going to use is another item from the Dollar Tree, and that is my baby wipes to just create a surface that has some moisture on there. So let me go through, and as I am doing the techniques here, I'm going to kind of show you 3 different ways to blend, 3 different techniques, and then I'm going to pull it all together into a page. If you watched last week, I did the letter A and talked about art, talked a little bit about composition, and I had several people actually that did a page with the word art. They shared it inside of my Art Journaling 101 group. So that was so much fun. Linda, were you one of the people that shared your page inside of the group? I feel like you had done one last week. That is always fun to see. If you want to do, you know, an example of blending and turn it into a page, I'm going to incorporate a word today in mine, because what I'm doing in the Art Journaling 101 for January for the prompts is a word. So I'm going to incorporate that kind of into this page here too. So let me go ahead and get you to the blending. But I would love to know, what are the problems that you've had with blending? Where do you get frustrated? Like, where do you get hung up? And I will share the different tips, the mistakes that people make, and tips to kind of get past those too. So I'm going to take a drink. I'm having some iced coffee this morning. I just make it here at home, and so I decided to have some of that. But I'm going to go ahead and turn this down. And the first technique that I'm going to show to you actually does use the 2 different colors. And what I'm going to do, I think, is turn my journal this direction, and I'm going to kind of show you in 3 different kind of sections here the different techniques, and just kind of show you how I do those. I was looking to see, I'm not gonna block them up, like I'm not gonna put on here. Let me see if I can just, so that you can kind of see. That one doesn't have that. So you can kind of see the 3 sections. I'll just put kind of a line in here. So in this section over here, I'm laughing because I gave my dog a rawhide and it went underneath. Hi there, Lori. It went underneath the couch. So he's over there a little frustrated right now because he can't get it from underneath there. But I am going to go ahead and take, because this is one of the mistakes that I see a lot of people when they're trying to blend. They start with a dry canvas, and you will have much better success blending if you have a moistened surface. So if you have a spray bottle that mists, that is probably the best to use. But I'm just going to go ahead and use my baby wipe and just kind of get this watercolor paper moist with that. And I'm going to use my quinacridone magenta and the cobalt blue and maybe a little bit of white. And I'm going to show you, I'll just kind of cover up. This little piece of paper here is from a shipping label, like the backing. Hey there, Kathy. And this is what I'm using for my palette. And it works it works really well, and sometimes I'll reuse these papers in my collages. So there's a little tip for you for that too. This is kind of curling just a little bit, but I think once I get paint down on there, it won't. So I'm going to start with the magenta. And I think I'm still going to use this brush, and it is dry. I am going to put it into my water, but I'll show you what I do is I kind of wipe off a lot of the water on the edge of my cup, so then it's just kind of damp. You can also use your paper towel just to kind of blot it off, but I like to use like a damp brush. So the paper is damp, my brush is damp, and I will go ahead and this is such a great color. One of the other mistakes that I see people do is they don't use enough paint. And if you're using craft paint to be able to do this, see where I see a lot of the paper right there? That means I don't have enough paint on my... So it's, when you're blending, it uses a lot more paint than you think. And I can even go back into my water and help that paint just flow a little bit better. And I can tell when I put too much water on there, then it doesn't stay as opaque. It doesn't cover as much. And if you're using craft paint, you may need to do this in multiple layers. And if you're seeing a lot of brush strokes, if you're seeing where it doesn't blend, that might be the problem. So let me see if I can get this cobalt blue opened up now. Oh my goodness, I don't think that I can. Oh, here, let me see if I can use this. I know that lid is supposed to make it easier, but sometimes it does not. I don't think I'm going to be able to get it open. I'm just going to use white because sometimes the screw lids are easier. So I'm going to get plenty of white on there. And I'm going to go ahead and just make sure that that pink, that magenta is still wet. You want to work pretty fast. So I want to make sure that that's wet. I could have started with the white paint, but I'm going to go ahead and wash that off. And I can kind of, I can tell when I'm wiping it off on the paper towel if there's no more pink left on there. And then I'll go down here. The paper is still wet. My paintbrush is moist. I use a lot of the white. I know that you can't see the white because I might use one of the other ones, but here is what I normally do. When you're trying to blend paints, don't start with the white up here. Start at the other end, away from the paint that you've already put on there, because you're going to have the most amount of paint on your brush when you first put it down. So you don't want it to be right up there beside the paint that you're trying to blend. Need a little bit more water on my brush. Oh, and then I've got a little bit of pink in the water. And then what I do, as I come up to here, I don't have as much paint on my brush. So what I will do is come right up to that, and I will just start going over. Now this should still be, kind of wet. I don't have very much paint on my brush. And I will just start blending. And this works because the paint is pretty opaque. This won't work as well when you're, look at how beautiful that color is when they blend. This won't work as well if you're using craft paints, but if you're using something like this that is more opaque, it will work really well. And that is how you can get a pretty good blend. Now, if you're still not getting a good blend when you're taking one paint up in next to the other and blending, that is when you can take your dry brush and you can just go over, and you can really only pass over it one time and you can get a better blend in there. So that is one way, using two different brushes kind of coming up next to each other, where you can get the, kind of like a gradation. So I'm going to do the same thing in here with the second technique. And that one is going to use a sponge. It can be one of these finger daubers. It can be like this kind of a dauber. It can be, it could even be like one of these brushes. But again, it's some other kind of dry blending tool for you to be able to use to be able to blend the two colors. So I'm going to start with I'm going to put some water right here on my paper before I get started, because I don't know how much that baby wipe. Well, I didn't even do this one with the baby. Yeah, so I needed to make sure it's moist. And then I am going to go ahead and start with the white on this one. And I know you can't really see that, but this bottom part has the white here. And I'm rinsing out my brush, but I am not, like, I'm wiping it off a lot. It's moist, but it's not wet. So I'm wiping it off in the paper towel. I'll take it and I'll kind of go in between there. And then I'm going to go into the magenta, quinacridone magenta. It is, I mean, just look at how pretty that color. There's not a craft paint that looks like this one. It's just one of my favorites. And it just makes such a really pretty pink. And it's so pretty mixed with the blue. Now, one of the other ways that I've seen people blend colors is they start with, you can see where the water that's on there, it created, a really light. Some people start with a really light wash and they just build up the layers. So I'll review like all the techniques and the tips and things at the end, because I'm just kind of sharing with them like randomly, but I'll share, all of them at the end here. So I have the white and I have the pink there, the quinacridone. And I'm going to go in with my blender brush, and I'm just going to get a little bit of the quinacridone on there. And I can either kind of dab into there and kind of go into some of the white and kind of dab. And I can start to get that blending, or I can start to kind of do the circular, and look at that nice pink on there. And it'll kind of go down into the white a little bit more. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll like tap off. That's the thing when you're blending. Once you have the paint on there to blend it, really you need to not have that much paint on there. It almost needs to be a dry brush. So that is one way. You can use that. You can use something like the makeup brush and kind of go in these circular. And so this is not wet. I don't want this to be wet. I want it to be a dry brush. I had quite a lot of. And that's the thing, like right there I have too much pink. So I'm going to go into my white, and then I can start blending that out. So that's another way that you can And look, it gives me a completely different look, more like a cloudy kind of a look, right? Than this one where it's straight across. This reminds me more of like a sunset, right? Whereas this is more like clouds, more like the sky. A really soft, you know, sky like it, I don't know, like at daytime. I'm going to put some more white kind of down in here and kind of get rid of more of that line that's in there. So there's not as much white at the bottom of this one, but this little soft brush works really well for blending like this. Okay, the last one, I kind of did two different techniques on this one. I kind of did the circles and the sponge brush. So I'm not going to put this in the water, but I will show you this one. So this was just kind of like blending with the circles, and you know, I could have done it like with this dry brush. It was just kind of like a small area to do that. But this one I'm going to do more with like the dauber sponge. And for something like this little finger sponge, it is best to put it in the water. Like I'll just put it in the water if I'm done with it, and that way it doesn't build up the layers of paint. But you can kind of like wash it out. I use Master's Touch Cleaner to wash out my brushes. So even if there's kind of dried up paint, it will get that off there. So I'm going to go ahead and do this third one here. And I'll use the sponge. So kind of the three different techniques, and really I gave you a fourth one where you start with like really thin layers where it's a little watery. And especially if you're using like craft paints, you might need to do like 3 or 4 layers. Start off with a wet, you know, a wetter layer and kind of like build up. That's also going to help you with your paint strokes and not seeing those, because you're building up the layers of the paint, and so that the top layer is really just paint, but it's kind of blending in with the moisture of the paint under it. Keep telling me in the comments, what are your frustrations with blending? What do you have the most problem with when you're blending? Is it just like not seeing the brush strokes? Because that could be your paint that you're using, or it could just be that you don't have enough layers. You really have to kind of like build up the layers. I'm going to let that dry just for a second because it got really wet. Actually, I want it damp, but not like wet on there. So I'll start with the white down here again. And this one I'm going to do the dauber brush. And you can even put on your paint, you know, kind of more in, you know, kind of like a circular motion to kind of like blend it. A lot of times what I will do, so I don't get as much paint in, hi there, Donna. So I don't get as much paint in my water, I will wipe off as much paint as I can on my paper towels, and then I'll clean it off. Just getting all kinds of tips today. All kinds of my painting tips. Now I'm going to go into the magenta. And just like I did on this first one, I'm starting away from what I just painted. And I would say that's a lot of what I see a mistake that people make, is they start right beside the color that they just put down, and you just have too much paint. You're always going to have a line if you try to put like wet paint right up next to wet paint like that. That could definitely be one of the problems that you have in mixing and blending. Blending is more the right word, not mixing. Mixing paints is a whole nother thing. Whole different word. And if you're doing this on canvas, it is going to react a little bit differently than what I'm doing here on the watercolor paper, but the techniques are still the same. It's just reacting a little bit different because it's on paper here. So now that I have this one, and I kind of have a little space in here, and yeah, Donna, you could call it ombre. I'm just showing like how to mix, but you could use a light pink and a dark pink. I was going to use this cobalt blue, but I couldn't get the lid open. So I could have used a craft paint, and then I would have gotten a purple kind of in the middle there. It's still the same technique. So I'm going to just keep this wet. My white is still wet down here. I'm going to wipe off a lot of this magenta paint on here, and then I'm going to pick up my white. I've already got a little bit of the pink in there. I just kind of want to make sure that that is still wet right there. I might even go into a little bit of my water, because then what I want to do is use the dauber. And I know that this has the blue paint on there, but it's dry. But I need a little bit more magenta on there, I feel like. Because it wasn't quite like wet enough. So I kind of go like up into the color that I'm trying to blend, and then I'll kind of bring it down. And that kind of gives you like a really soft look with the sponge. But you could also use, I think this is actually a stenciling brush, you know, so if I wanted to blend with that and kind of do a circular, you know, kind of how I was doing over on this one. Sometimes I like that look. And because this white paint is still wet down here, it's really blending in. If I have too much of the pink on there, then I will wipe it off on my paper towel. If I'm still getting a lot of whatever the color is, I'll go back into the color that's at the bottom. So this is white. And then I can kind of blend that out. When you're blending, you really don't need that much paint. Like I'm just kind of going into the white to kind of pick up a little bit of that. And if I wanted to go back down here and add white, I would probably wait for this to completely dry. That's another thing with acrylic paint. You can go over and change things, especially if it's already dry. So I may want more, or maybe I decided that I wanted to just kind of go to the light pink. I can kind of go back up in here. This is still, you know, pretty wet, and I can kind of blend that. And even bring some of that. I just love that pink color that quinacridone magenta makes. So kind of 3 different ones, and I still have a little bit of the quinacridone magenta on here that I will use. But for the blending on here, then because I'm going to make this into something here, you can do these same techniques, whether you're going to use a dry brush, you're going to use kind of just circles, you're going to use a sponge. You can use any of those techniques going in a circle. If you've seen like some paintings where, you know, it's kind of like a moon, you know, and then like the blending, it's still the same techniques. I'm going to go ahead and use this soft brush because I do want to kind of make this into kind of a finished. So I'm going to go over that line that I put in there, and I'm just using this dry brush for now, and then I can kind of blend those. And even with this golden paint, there are still some areas where I feel like it's thinner because I added the water to it. So you just kind of have to experiment with some of your paints too. And I'm adding just a little bit of water and I should be able to, yeah. The magenta is very vibrant. My goodness, it's such a great color. If you're only going to get one golden paint, I would suggest the Quinacridone Magenta and white. And see, you know, I didn't get those paints until I had been doing mixed media for a while, painting for a while, and the quality of the paint is just so much better. I'm taking away a lot of the white in there. Look, I have a lot of the magenta. I got right down in the bottom there. Might add a little bit more white. It takes some practice as you kind of figure out that you need to have a dry brush for blending. Then you know that you need the paper towels, you know, wipe off, when you're blending, keep the brush dry. So see, I was able to go back over with that titanium white because it's more opaque and it actually covered up the magenta. I'm going to do some of that over in here too. And you can just keep going over with a soft brush like this and it will really blend out your paints. I have a little bit of that line that I can kind of see up in there. Take a little bit more to come in here. And see, I had a little bit of white on my brush, so now it's kind of coming up into that magenta. So I can come back in there just with a little bit of that, and because it's opaque too, it's gonna cover that up. I feel like I need a little bit more kind of right up the top here. What I'm gonna do, oh, I still had some white on my brush. And I picked up the water. Too much of it. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of blend that out a little bit. Pick up some magenta. There's an area kind of right in here where I feel like the paint kind of picked up. Can you kind of see, like right in that area right there? So I'm going to wait for this paint to dry. I could use my heat tool, but wait for it to dry and then I could cover that up and it'll kind of cover it up. But I'll show you what I'm going to do to finish. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of my brushes, everything that I used in the water to make sure they don't get stiff. And I think what I'm going to do is actually turn, because I had my first page going vertically. So I'm going to turn this one this direction, and I want to have some kind of focal point. And I talked a little bit about this last week with the letter A. I have these two cards and I want to do a word, and I'm going to show you one other storage technique, storage tip, and how I'm going to put a word. So if you were going to pick, would you pick this, what do they call this, a cone flower, or would you pick these hearts to go with what I already have on here? This one is going to, you know, kind of like blend with all the colors, right? It has the pinks and the purples, whereas this one is going to contrast a little bit more and not stand out, and stand out more, where this is going to blend. Which one would you choose? Do you like the coneflower one, or do you like the hearts? Coneflower or the hearts? What I'm going to do is have this be the focal point. I am probably still going, let's just say I choose this one. I'm not going to put it probably right in the middle. I'm probably going to put it like up on a corner. And here's my little storage tip for you. I like to collect words, and I needed some place to be able to keep all of them together. So this is one of the ways that I do this. I got this tray from the Dollar Tree, and I just have all of my words in here. So like I have a little baggie that has words. I have pages that I have printed off with quotes. I have little pieces of mail that I've gotten that would have words on there that I can cut apart. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll just take this little tray here and I will just start cutting out some of the words from it. So I have, I have pieces like this where I cut out some of the words. I mean, I even saved my grocery list because it says on the top, change is beautiful. So if I ever want words to put on a page like this, I have this whole tray of all of these words and things that I printed out that have, that have words on there. And you can kind of start to piece them together. So I have some flowers, coneflower, mishmash. It will be helpful. Oh, very good, Donna. So I think that I'm probably going to use the flower, and I think that I'm probably going to put it down like in this corner. I may add some other stenciling, some different other things in the background because I love the layers. And then I'm going to, kind of cover this up. But I think that I'm going to put words in there too, and maybe even create kind of like a found poem, kind of in there where I have some words together. But I think if I'm going to use the flower, I think my word is going to be growth. And so I may find in my little stash there some words and piece those together and create something on this page here. And that is my page for blending. So let me go ahead and tell you and just kind of review the 3 different techniques that I showed to you. One was using kind of a dry brush at the end to blend your 2 colors together. So you can do that whether it's kind of a horizontal, sunset kind of idea for the sky, or you can use it if it's in a circle, and you just use that dry brush to kind of blend the 2 colors together. The second technique was where you take the 2 colors and you can even put on the colors kind of in a circular motion, and then you use something to kind of blend in the circular motion, whether that's a sponge or whether that's a makeup brush from the Dollar Tree, whatever that is. And then the third technique is to use a sponge and kind of dab it and blend that way. So those are kind of 3 different techniques. And the 4th bonus one that I told you was to start off with a thin layer with more water and kind of build up so that your final layer is a thicker paint. Especially that works well if you're using craft paints because you're building up the layers and you won't see the brush strokes. And you can use the dry brush over that. You can use the sponge over it, but building up the layers with the craft paint, that may be your solution if you're having a lot of problems seeing the brush strokes. So here are some of the different tips that I shared that might help with some of the mistakes. One is to have kind of a wet surface, especially if you're working on a canvas. So wet your surface, use a spray bottle, use one that is more of a mister spray bottle so it kind of spreads instead of this is just a single stream of water. And make sure that your brush is also kind of wet, like not dripping wet, right? But have some moisture too. So the moisture of the paper and the moisture of the brush will help you to blend. You want to use just a little paint at first, but not so much that you see the canvas. That's going to take practice. That's going to take practice to know exactly how much to be able to use. Have the layers dry in between. Just like I was talking about, I want to let this little spot dry and then I can go over it. Acrylic paint covers really well, especially if it's opaque paint, if you let it dry first. And I have honestly painted white over top of black after it's dried, and it covered it up, especially the titanium white. Make sure that you use a dry brush to blend. And if you start getting too much paint on there, wipe the brush off. Don't put it in the water, but wipe the brush off. And that dry brush, as long as the paint is still wet, will really help to blend. And then the last one, I didn't talk too much about this, but think about your colors. When I wanted to do the quinacridone and the blue, these two colors will make purple. You're not going to have a quinacridone to blue and not have a purple in there. You have to think about the colors that you're going to use and whether they're colors that would naturally kind of blend together. Color is a whole nother thing, but you do kind of have to think about the colors beforehand if they're going to be colors that will blend well together and like what the color makes when they blend. You know, I knew that the quinacridone and the white make a beautiful pink together. So I know that I'm going to see that pink in my blending because they're blending together. So I'm going to see that pink in there. So you have to think about some of your colors. I hope that this was helpful for you and you learned some tips. If you want to share in the comments when you watch this what your biggest tip was, something that you learned that you didn't know before about blending, I would love to know what that is. I will be back next week for the letter C. Oh, Donna gave a good tip there. She said either keep it cool colors, so like blue, green, and purple, or keep it warm colors like the orange and the yellow and the red. That's a great tip to make sure, you know, that the colors go well together. So I love that tip, Donna. But go ahead and put in the comments. I will be back next week on Monday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern to do the letter C. And if you have some guesses or you have suggestions, I have a C word picked out, but if you have a suggestion of something you'd like to learn related to art with the letter C, you can go ahead and put it in the comments. And I will see you back again next week at 10:30 for the ABCs of Art.